Have you ever noticed that some of the sharpest minds do not walk through life feeling powerful? They often feel tired, not because they cannot understand the world, but because they understand too much of it at once. While other people seem able to move from one day to the next without much inner friction, a highly intelligent mind can feel like it is carrying an extra layer of reality. Every conversation has subtext. Every decision has hidden trade-offs. Every plan has weaknesses before it even begins. From the outside, that kind of mind looks like an advantage. From the inside, it can feel exhausting. We like to imagine intelligence as a clean blessing, a faster mind, better choices, more success, more control. But real life is not that simple. In many cases, the same mental abilities that make someone insightful also make them more vulnerable to overthinking, emotional overload, perfectionism, and a deep sense of social disconnection. And that is the part people rarely talk about. Because the problem is not that highly intelligent people think better. The problem is that they often cannot stop thinking at all. A very intelligent mind does not simply solve problems faster. It also notices more variables, more contradictions, and more possible consequences. Where one person sees a simple situation, another sees 10 invisible layers underneath it. That difference changes everything. It changes how they process conversations. It changes how they make decisions. It changes how they experience relationships, work, and even silence. For many people, when a difficult moment ends when the moment is over. But for someone with a highly analytical mind, the experience often continues long after it has passed. They replay the words. They study the tone. They imagine what the other person really meant. They test alternate interpretations. They wonder whether they missed something important. What looked like a small interaction from the outside becomes a long internal event. This is one reason highly intelligent people are often mistaken for being distant or intense. In reality, many of them are not trying to be complicated. Their mind simply keeps moving after everyone else has mentally left the room. And when that pattern repeats every day, it creates a kind of invisible fatigue. Not physical fatigue, cognitive fatigue. The fatigue of carrying too much mental activity for too long. So psychology has a phrase that helps explain part of this. Some people have a very high drive to engage with ideas. They are not satisfied with surface-level answers. They naturally pull things apart, test assumptions, and search for what is underneath the obvious explanation. That can be an extraordinary strength. It allows them to see patterns early. It helps them learn quickly. It gives them depth that others often admire. But depth has a cost. Because the more deeply you process reality, the harder it becomes to live inside simple stories. A person with a very active mind may struggle to accept easy explanations for human behavior. They notice hypocrisy in places where others see order. They notice manipulation where others see charm. They notice fragile systems beneath institutions that seem stable on the surface. At first, or this kind of perception feels like clarity. Later, it can begin to feel heavy. When you can see too much at once, comfort becomes harder to access. This is why intelligence does not automatically create peace. Sometimes it does the opposite. It removes the emotional shortcuts that help other people move through life with less friction. It exposes complexity where others are protected by simplicity. And if that insight is not balanced by emotional stability, it can quietly turn into chronic stress. Another challenge is that highly intelligent people often imagine ideal outcomes with unusual precision. They do not just want something good, they can picture something exceptional. They can see the elegant version of a project before it exists. They can imagine the most meaningful version of a relationship before it has had the chance to become real. They can see what their life could be if every part of their potential were fully expressed. That sounds inspiring, but it can also become a trap. Because reality rarely arrives in its ideal form. There are delays, compromises, misunderstandings, messy emotions, limitations, and imperfect timing. And when someone can clearly imagine the best possible version of something, ordinary progress may start to feel like failure. This is where perfectionism quietly enters, not always as vanity, often as disappointment. A disappointment so subtle that it becomes part of the person's identity. They begin to feel that they are always falling short of their own mind, even when they are doing well, even when others admire them. Even when they are objectively successful, inside they may still feel behind, not behind other people, behind their own potential. That internal pressure is one reason many highly intelligent people burn out in silence. They are not only carrying responsibilities, they are also carrying an image of who they think they should have become by now, and that image can be ruthless. There is also a deeper layer that people often misunderstand. Highly intelligent individuals are not always cold or detached. In many cases, they feel everything more intensely than they show. Their mind is active, but so is their emotional world. They may be deeply affected by injustice, dishonesty, cruelty, waste, or meaninglessness. They may react strongly to noise, conflict, chaotic environments, or emotional inconsistency in others. They may need more time alone, not because they dislike people, but because their nervous system gets overloaded more easily. This combination can be confusing. A person may look calm on the outside while feeling overstimulated on the inside. They may appear reserved while actually processing more emotion than the people around them. They may withdraw, not because they have nothing to say, but because there is too much to say and not enough room to say it properly. That leads to one of the most painful experiences of all, feeling deeply understood by almost no one. For many highly intelligent people, loneliness is not about the absence of people. It is about the absence of resonance. They can be surrounded by coworkers, friends, even family, and still feel strangely unseen. Well, conversations may stay on the surface while their own mind keeps reaching for depth. Small talk may serve a social purpose, but after too much of it, they can feel empty rather than connected. So they adapt. They simplify themselves. They speak in a more ordinary way. They hide the intensity of their curiosity. They pretend not to care about the questions that actually keep them awake at night. Over time, this becomes a social survival strategy. But survival is not the same as belonging. When someone repeatedly edits their natural way of thinking just to make others comfortable, a subtle form of isolation begins to grow. They stop feeling rejected by people and start feeling separated from life itself. This is why some highly intelligent people describe themselves as feeling out of place, or even in environments where they are accepted. They are included, but they are not fully met. Another hidden struggle is that highly intelligent minds often drift toward existential questions much earlier and much more intensely than other people. They think about time, death, purpose, human contradiction, and the scale of the universe in a way that does not always fit into daily conversation. They do not just ask how to live. They ask what any of this ultimately means. And once those questions take root, it can become difficult to return to ordinary routines with the same emotional innocence. Tasks that seem simple to others can begin to feel disconnected from the deeper concerns taking up space in their mind. Work, errands, social obligations. What in repetition may start to feel strangely thin compared to the larger questions they are carrying internally. This does not make them weak. It makes them more exposed to a kind of psychological weight that many people are able to avoid. The more your mind reaches for truth, the less satisfying distraction becomes. And yet there is an important truth here that often gets missed. High intelligence is not the enemy. Unmanaged intelligence is. A powerful mind without grounding can become a source of suffering. A perceptive mind without emotional regulation can become overwhelmed by what it sees. A creative mind without boundaries can start living in imagined possibilities instead of lived reality. So what helps? Not forcing yourself to become less aware, not pretending to be simpler than you are. When not building an identity around being misunderstood, what helps is learning how to create balance. That starts with something highly intelligent people often resist: structure. Because a strong mind loves freedom, but the nervous system needs rhythm. Without rhythm, the mind expands until it consumes rest, sleep, and clarity. This is why simple habits matter more than most people realize. Limiting overstimulation, protecting sleep, writing thoughts down instead of carrying them all mentally, setting time boundaries for analysis, taking walks without input, returning to the body when the mind becomes too abstract. These are not small fixes. They are stabilizers. They help convert intelligence from pressure into usefulness. Another important shift is learning that not every thought deserves full engagement. And this is difficult for intelligent people because they are often rewarded for exploring complexity. But wisdom is not the same as endless analysis. Sometimes maturity means recognizing that a thought can be interesting without being useful. You do not have to solve every contradiction. You do not have to predict every outcome. You do not have to mentally rehearse every possible future before taking one step forward. At some point, clarity does not come from thinking more. It comes from stopping at the right moment. And perhaps most importantly, highly intelligent people need the right kind of connection, not constant attention, not admiration, not an audience. Resonance, people who value depth, people who can tolerate nuance, people who do not panic when a conversation becomes real, people who are not threatened by introspection, silence, or complexity. The right environment changes everything. In the wrong environment, intelligence can become tension. In the right environment, it becomes contribution. The same mind that once felt isolated can become deeply creative, deeply useful, and deeply alive when it is no longer forced to shrink itself for survival. That is the turning point. Not becoming less intense, becoming more integrated. Because the goal is not to escape your mind. The goal is to build a life that can hold it. A life with enough stillness for reflection, enough discipline for action, enough emotional strength for reality, and enough meaningful connection that your inner world no longer feels like a private burden. If you have felt out of step with the world, that does not necessarily mean something is wrong with you. It may mean your mind needs a different kind of care than most people are taught to give themselves. And once you understand that, intelligence stops feeling like a private storm. It becomes something quieter, something steadier, something you can finally live with. This is the quiet mindset, a place for people who think deeply, feel deeply, and want to live with more clarity instead of more noise. If this spoke to something you have never fully put into words, stay with us. There is more to understand. And more importantly, there is a calmer way to carry it.